Az egyik legérdekesebb és egyben legkevésbé ismert ősi embercsoport a denisovai ember. Hosszú ideig létezésüket szinte kizárólag genetikai nyomokból, DNS maradványokból feltételeztük, egy Újpercből, Szibériából és egy állkapocsból a tibeti fennsíkról. De arcukról, fizikai megjelenésükről mindeddig semmit sem tudtunk. Kína Heilongjiang tartományában, a Sárkány folyó néven ismert területen. Egy hídépítő projekt során egy kínai munkás rendkívüli leletre bukkant egy hatalmas, archaikus emberi koponyára. A korszellem, az iskolai képzettség hiánya és a politikai instabilitás miatt ez a munkás rendkívüli döntést hozott, elrejtette a koponyát egy elhagyatott kútba, évtizedekre elfedve a tudományos világ elől. Csupán 2018-ban halálos ágyán fedte fel a titkot családjának, akik ezután eljutották a koponyát a kutatókhoz. A Harbin koponya az egyik legnagyobb valaha talált emberi koponya, mérete meghaladja a legtöbb neandervölgyi és korai homo sapiens példányét, sőt egy homo heidelbergensis egyedét is. Morfológiai elemzése során archaikus és modern vonások egyedülálló keverékét mutatta, nagy szemüregeket és vastag szemöldökívet, hasonlóan a neandervölgyiekhez, ugyanakkor lapos, alacsony arccsontokat és modern emberi agyméretet. A datálás többek között storcium izotópos és röntgenfluoreszens vizsgálatokkal legalább 146 000 évesre tette ezt a koponyát a középső pleisztocén időszakára. Hogy miért fontos ez? Azért, mert ez az időszak kulcsfontosságú volt az archaikus emberi migrációk szempontjából.
It was a Christmas present to myself. It's a really good book. You'll definitely enjoy it. There's a link in the description. It's the only summary of human evolution from an Asian perspective available to read, really. The really old site he just mentioned, at a whopping 2.43 million years old, is Shihodu in China's northern Shaanxi province on the banks of the Yellow River. A beautiful region steeped in Chinese history. It looks fantastic. I'd truly love to visit. I found the paper discussing Shihodu though. Here it is. Evidence for the earliest human settlement in northern China. What they found, I will be the first to admit, does not look like much. It really doesn't. Very, very simple stone tools. One of the challenges when you go further and further back in time is that our technology, human technology, got simpler and simpler, and it just becomes harder to distinguish from regular rocks, broken rocks. But a lot of it revolves around how many flakes were removed and is there a pattern in their removal. You can see it here in one of the artifacts from the paper. I think this is the clearest example. 6 flakes have been removed along the top. Maybe it's hard for nature to remove flakes in a pattern like that, especially if you have multiple examples at the same site showing some sort of pattern in flake removal. But the evidence doesn't just rely on that one site. There's another one called Shangchen, which dates to around 2.1 million years ago. Again, more stone tools. I will grant you these rocks, humble rocks, are not very visually striking. And as I said, there is always a debate about whether we're looking at a tool or a rock. But we do have ancient human remains from China too. The oldest remains so far, I believe, are called Lantian Man. He lived an astonishing 1.63 million years ago, and he, or she, was living their best life, killing bison, chopping them up with their stone tools. It's very cool. I'll never get tired of looking in the face of a human well over 1 million years old. It's incredible. That's so staggeringly old. It's fascinating. The fact that these early humans were able to expand as far as China does really say a lot about their intelligence and their adaptability. Zambia, Dragon Man and others in China, all sorts of interesting skulls from Spain too. Anthropologists simply have not been able to agree how to categorize these skulls. Are these one species we're dealing with? Which specimens are we related to? Which ones do we descend from? How do they relate to each other? We just don't know. We quite simply do not know. And this debate is called the muddle in the middle. And the role of these Chinese fossils in that muddle is still not clear. It's still not clear at all. Actually highlighting the tooth, it's highlighting the plaque, the dental calculus, the gross stuff stuck to the teeth. It turns out that the plaque can act as a kind of time capsule, protecting DNA inside it, presumably from the saliva of the individual. At least in the case of Harbin, it's protected the DNA in there for 140,000 years. So if you take anything away from this video, do not brush your teeth. Don't brush your teeth. You're really hindering scientific research in 150,000 years. Geneticists are going to need that. The mitochondrial DNA gathered from the plaque also placed the Harbin cranium in the Denisova family, particularly the early Denisovans, which makes sense because Harbin is an older cranium too. It's an older fossil too. It's around that age. It's so cool to finally be able to look these Denisovans in the face instead of just thumbs and teeth and just small fragments of bone that, I don't know, you just can't relate to them like a face. When you see someone's face, you get a true sense of how they looked and who they are. It's brilliant. I love it. Presumably, this also means that the Dali cranium and the Jinyu Shan are also a part of this Denisovan population. Very cool.
Of more than 11 individuals of hominids.
Unfortunately, the remains at Shujiao are very fragmentary, but based on reconstructions, they had some serious noggins.
So they matched the parietal fragments with the occipital, and they were able to actually reconstruct the posterior part, the back part of the skull, and then from there, they were able to reconstruct the estimated cranial capacity. And they realized that the cranial capacity for Shujiao is actually quite large. And very, very similar to the cranial capacity that was estimated for Xuchang. And we're talking about 17 to 1800 cubic centimeters. And the average modern human cranial capacity is about 1350 cubic centimeters, right? Neanderthals are like 1400 to 1450. So these guys are actually quite large.
Even the Dragon Man cranium, that robust cranium, had a capacity of 1420 cc's. So Shujiao and Xuchang, they're much bigger on average. You could find modern humans with heads that big now, but it's definitely not average to have a big head like that now. Professor Bei and his colleague Shiju Wu feel that Xuchang and Shujiao are not quite the same population as Homo longi. They gave them a different name, Homo juluensis. Walking around. I know that is sort of a conspiracy, pseudo-archaeological conspiracy that some people have, that Denisovans are giants. I don't really know where that started from. Shujiao is full of the remains of broken and butchered horses. I love to imagine them out there on the plain, listening to them plan an ambush, celebrating perhaps the prospect of a full belly. Did they recount the actions of the day, argue over who gets what part? I love imagining life deep in prehistory. It's the best. Here's where things get complicated even more. I know I've said that before, but this video gets complicated. Professor Bei and his colleagues believe that Homo juluensis is also a great match for the Denisovans, and it comes down to the morphology of two specific teeth.
One of the reasons is if you actually look at like the tooth occlusal surfaces, right? So the skull, the teeth morphology, they look almost identical between Shujiao and Denisova, right? So you could change them and be basically the same individual, right? And so it was a pretty easy argument to make at that point to say that the Denisovan fossils should be assigned to Homo juluensis.
I had to ask him what he thought about, Homo longi now being assigned to Denisovans, or rather Denisovans assigned to Homo longi based on genetics and proteins, but based on morphology, he thought it was this Homo juluensis population.